ESPN's Mel Kiper said about Hendon Hooker, quote, "What also bothers me, Joe Milton came in when Hooker was hurt, lit up the Clemson Tigers, so that Josh Heupel quarterback-friendly offense made it possible for these numbers to be through the roof." Okay, what the H there? This What the H brought to you by Vassy Lawn and Garden. Man alive, it's worth the drive. Here's what bugs me about that statement. If you watch that game, Tennessee, either because of Clemson's coverage or because they were playing to Joe Milton's strengths, basically ran a totally different offense and a lot of slants, a lot of stuff over the middle that I thought took Clemson by surprise. That is why I don't carry a lot of optimism, and I know people are going to call me a Milton hater, from that one game. That one Clemson game. I don't carry a lot of that from Joe Milton because I think they caught Clemson a little bit by surprise by what they did. They took advantage of his strengths. Great job by the entire staff, by Milton top to bottom, but I don't think it means he's a Heisman Trophy candidate. So, listen, I watched Mel Kiper back in the day. He reminds me of the Blue Falcon, if anybody remembers that, and Dino Mutt going way back. But come on. If you watch that game, you got to realize that Clemson a little bit didn't want to be there, and Tennessee took advantage of a situation in which Joe Milton was a great fit. But that doesn't mean that they just plugged and played another quarterback. And against Vanderbilt, he was very limited with the one deep pass and a terrible rainstorm. I mean, come on. This is a little too just on the surface topical, easy thing to say for somebody like Mel Kiper.
Mel Kiper exposed himself with this. I was friendly to Kirby Smart because what he said was accurate. I'm not going to be friendly to Mel Kiper because what he said is evidence that he does not watch the college football games at all. At all. This was an embarrassing quote from Mel Kiper. He should be absolutely ashamed of himself for this quote. Because
feels like a leak. Feels like this is what some NFL team told him to better position themselves in the draft, is what it feels like to me.
Yes, but Mel Kiper himself is a draft analyst. His whole shtick is I analyze the quarterbacks myself.
I agree. You shouldn't rely on those. Don't get me wrong, but it just feels like an easy way to share some news that really isn't news.
And he is embarrassing and humiliating himself by sharing that. Anybody, look, let's get one thing out of the way. Does Tennessee's offense allow for quarterbacks to put up big numbers even if they're not ready for the NFL? Yes, absolutely it does. There's no debating that. If anybody thinks for a second what Tennessee did against Clemson is anywhere similar to what they did the whole season with Hendon Hooker, they weren't watching Tennessee. More importantly, you're right. Clemson didn't want to be there. If you ever analyze quarterbacks based on a bowl game, I've said this for years, you shouldn't be a scout. This is the same Mel Kiper. We're seeing now why Mel Kiper thought Jamarcus Russell was a transcendent quarterback in 2007. Remember, that was Mel Kiper who thought that, okay? He probably just saw Jamarcus Russell's stats in that Sugar Bowl against Notre Dame and thought, this guy can play, without watching any bit of Jamarcus Russell his entire college career. Mel Kiper is turning into, if he says something, even true things said by him, I start to not believe. This is the most ridiculous thing.
Yeah, I hate to say this. I don't like talking about other media members. One, that's always been a policy. And number two, I mean, he's getting up there in age, but I hate to say this, but I think he's kind of lost a little bit of his edge for a couple of years. And he had a really good source with the Giants, and he broke a lot of news, and he was in tight with the Mara family. So I think that carried him for a lot of years. I'm not sure that's out there anymore. The second What the H of the day, brought to you by Vassy Lawn and Garden. Man alive, is worth the drive. Vassy Lawn and Garden has the industrial mowers, the commercial mowers. Toro, count on it. They're all right there in Cleveland. You can come from Knoxville, Nashville, or Chattanooga. You'll love it. Vassy Lawn and Garden, man alive, it's worth the drive. Hit that like button, thumbs up. We greatly appreciate that to make sure we bring in more people. If you haven't subscribed yet, what are you doing? Get on board. Mr. Jones said, these so-called experts always hop up these garbage quarterbacks. Levis and Anthony Richardson were horrible. Anyone who watched football can tell you that. Totally agree. But I think there's something else going on, Caleb. I think there's something else going on, and I'm going to use Mel Kiper's comments as a jumping off point. I think there is with Hendon Hooker, you're just too good. You're just too good. You're like Tim Tebow reborn. You're like LeBron James And both of those guys had big hype about their personality and their character. And everybody, I feel like, has been waiting for LeBron James to mess up in some shape, form, or fashion, and he hasn't. There's a lot of people that were waiting for Tim Tebow to mess up. I had one person that was in a college event with me and said, I heard he had a beer. I just wanted you to know. I'm like, well, big deal. He's 22 years old. I mean, so I feel like Hendon Hooker has that some of that going on, where some people view it almost, and work with me here, almost as sanctimonious, even though he's not. I think they're waiting for him to mess up because the story is too good and the character is too good. I believe people are waiting for him to mess up. I believe that firmly, just the way they were with Tim Tebow.
That's possible. I think where Hendon Hooker is a little different, though, than Tim Tebow or LeBron James, or even, honestly, let's bring him out because he's beloved too, Peyton Manning in a certain way, who carried himself in a way that everybody respects, is I think that with those guys, yes, they were genuine, they're decent people, but they were trying to craft an image of themselves. I don't think Hooker's like out here got a team around him, like thinking like every little thing I say, I got to craft this image of myself. I just think this is him.
I completely agree. I think you're talking about the Kobe factor. I think Kobe tried to craft an image, and then we all know what happened or allegedly happened in Denver, and that hurt his image. I think Michael Jordan wanted the image. I look at the reason I picked out LeBron and Tim Tebow, one has been very open about his faith, one hasn't. But the reason I picked those two guys is there has been nothing off the court / field that they've done wrong to this point. They've proved to be genuine. There aren't a lot of those guys that are the mega stars, let's face it, especially with the Masters going on and Tiger Woods there. We've seen how south things can go. I just don't think people believe it. I don't think people believe that Hendon Hooker can be that good of a quarterback, that good of a guy, and go that high when you didn't know who he was a year ago. I think that's what a lot of people think, Mel Kiper included. How could he be so off on Hendon Hooker 12 months ago?
I think there's also a little bit of laziness going on, which is I think people look at Josh Heupel's offense and they see how Drew Lock didn't work out in the NFL, and they just think, oh, every quarterback's a failure in the NFL in this offense. But that's not how things work. Every quarterback was a failure that came from the air raid to the NFL until Patrick Mahomes went to the NFL. And so just because a coach in college can inflate a quarterback's stats, and you have to question how good the quarterback is, how much it's the quarterback and how much it's the coach. That doesn't mean every quarterback that plays under that coach is not cut out for the next level. It's the other way around. Every quarterback can succeed under that coach, good or bad, but that doesn't mean every quarterback is not going to succeed in the NFL. Some will, some won't. And so I think there's just a laziness that, this, Dave. How many college coaches have we covered who had great track records with college quarterbacks that failed in the NFL? And I think people just immediately lazily say, oh, if you play for this coach, that means you're not a good quarterback. No, it just means if you play for the coach, it's not going to determine, or in a system, it's not going to determine how good of a quarterback you are. That doesn't mean you're not going to be a good quarterback at the next level. And again, Patrick Mahomes. Cliff Kingsbury is a Mike Leach protege. Everybody from that offense failed in the NFL, from Tim Couch to Graham Harrell to B.J. Simmons, to you name it. But then came Patrick Mahomes, and he might go down as the best quarterback of all time.
Portions of the program brought to you by City Heat and Air Conditioning, cityheatingandair.com, cityheatandair.com. Integrity matters. You might not need a whole new unit when the temperatures get warm and something clunks out. They can fix that. Mr. Jones throwing a lot of heat on the message board, and these so-called experts always hype up these garbage quarterbacks. Amen to that. AR hit the ceiling at his pro day, not on purpose, just because his accuracy is horrible. I did see that. I'm not exactly sure. Lastly, Travis says, I think Hendon Hooker has two noticeable flaws. One, being middle of the field accuracy, agreed. And two, being sacked, especially the big ones. He was rattled at times and unproductive. I don't remember him getting rattled. And
that was 2021 Hooker. Last year, remember, he got hurt from a sack against Florida, and the next drive, he let a go-ahead touchdown drive at the end of the half.